Hi, Chapter 9, Paper Boat. Z89 lifted her face towards the sun and breathed in deeply. The air tasted fresh and clean. This was her time to feel free, even if it was just for 1 hour. The bench where she sat was hard and unforgiving. She ignored the discomfort, enjoying the rich blue sky above her. White wisps added to the picture, and the occasional bird brought song to her ears. Z89 was suddenly aware of someone sitting down at the end of her bench. She looked without turning her head and was pleased to see it was Z42. They sat in silence. "Get up and walk," the voice echoed around the lush green parkland. "Orientation is your time for exercise." The young man and girl stood up together and began to stroll along the many paths that zigzagged around the area. They fell easily into step with each other. "You may talk." The voice came again, and gradually, like a stream babbling and then turning into a rapid river, all around them came voices, words, phrases, laughter. The blues, greys and whites around them joined one another in 2s, 3s and 4s. Z89 smiled and listened for a moment before speaking to the tall, thin boy who walked beside her. "How are you?" she asked politely. "I am well, thank you." Z89 now noticed he walked with a slight limp. "What happened to your leg?" "Oh, nothing, just another experiment." He stopped and turned to her. "I like you," he said. "Can we walk together again?" "I like you too. Yes, we could meet on the bench." Z89's heart was beating fast at the thought that someone liked her, but anxious this might get her into trouble. As though he read her thoughts, he said, "We must be careful, though. We have to be seen talking to others too." At that, Z42 gently touched her hand. It was momentary, but it was like an electrical impulse. She had felt that before, and then it caused her pain, but this was different. The boy stepped away, and as he lowered his arm, Z89 saw him deliberately putting the tip of his forefinger against the tip of his thumb, a teardrop shape. Abruptly he turned away and walked towards a group of 3 boys who were standing talking quietly under some trees. Z89 looked around. She had to talk to someone. Z63 walked past with another girl deep in conversation. Z89 fell into step with them and joined in. Butterfly. Driving down a high-banked, narrow lane, they could see the campsite beyond, with a few colourful tents in a row. A dog was barking at some children playing football, and a flag was flapping in the strong breeze coming in from the Atlantic. The weather was changing. It had become warmer over the last few days, but today's wind made it feel a lot colder. On the far horizon, the cobalt blue sky met the pale blue of the sea, and the patchwork quilt of fields stretched out over rolling hills. Cara was standing by a wooden gate, the entrance to the campsite, waiting for them. She was all in black, and her white blonde hair contrasted with the darkness. She stood with confidence, her shoulders back, her feet astride, and her hands thrust into the pockets of the leather biker jacket. A gleaming red motorbike stood proudly at the side of the road, a matching helmet sitting on the scarlet leather seat. Erin felt slightly nervous at meeting the older girl. Erin had never been confident, apart from when doing karate, and now any confidence she did have evaporated and was plucked by the fierce wind that blew around them. "Hi, you must be Erin." Cara reached out to shake hands. Erin put her hand out gingerly, and a warm, slim hand took it. "Hi," she mumbled. Mal hugged the stranger, and his eyes lit up as she hugged him back. "Good to see you, Cara. This is your home for the next few days." Cara waved her arm towards the campsite beyond the gate. "Not my idea of comfort, though." She suddenly laughed out loud, perfect white teeth appearing from behind her crimson-coloured lips. While Mal and Erin unpacked their tent and set up camp, Cara put a kettle on to the small gas stove they brought with them. Later they sat around hugging their mugs of coffee. There was a chill in the air, and Erin threw on her fleece. Mal passed her a chocolate bar, which she devoured gratefully. Lunch seemed a long time ago. They'd have to find a supermarket soon. Almost as though she read Erin's mind, Cara said, "There's a small supermarket in the next town. Do you want me to come with you to show you where it is?" Mal nodded, and Erin decided she would stay at the site while the others went off being hunter-gatherers. She didn't want to be a gooseberry, as her dad would say. She waved them off and then sat down to text her dad to tell them they'd arrived. There were 3 texts from Petra, which she'd previously chosen to ignore, but now, with 400-odd miles between them, she decided to take a look. "You okay? Not seen you. Can we meet?" Then, "I need to see you. Shay and I have a secret to share." "Course you have," thought Erin. "I saw you together. I know your secret." The third was more mysterious. "Shay says he knows. He needs to warn you." Erin pondered these messages for a few moments and then deleted them. The last one stayed with her, though. What did he need to warn her about? Probably just to stay away from him and Petra. "Hey, can we come in?" Mal's voice came as a welcome diversion from her thoughts. She looked up to see her big brother standing with armfuls of shopping. "Come on, you. Stop looking at the screen. It'll make you turn blue." "You can talk." She laughed at the silly phrase their mum always said to them. "You must be positively purple by now." She helped him empty the bags of food, and they stored them carefully in the small fridge and plastic boxes they brought with them. They were both chatting away, comfortable again with each other, now they were finally doing something that might give them some answers. Mal deftly threw a loaf of bread, then apples across to Erin, who caught them and put them away. It began to feel like the camping holidays they had with Mum and Dad when they were younger. "Hi!" Cara's voice broke into the fun. She was carrying a sleeping bag and pillow and a small rucksack. Erin stared at her. She felt betrayed. So this was Mal's plan, for him and his girlfriend to get cosy together. "Hi," she muttered as she backed away to allow Cara to enter the tent. It was quite a large tent, with an area at the front for relaxing and eating, and curtained-off sections at the back for sleeping. But now, with 3 of them standing there looking awkwardly at each other, it seemed quite confined. Cara grinned sheepishly. "I just thought it made sense, you know, with me sleeping here. Then I don't have to keep coming back and forth from home." "Where is home?" Erin asked pointedly. "I live in Castleton with my dad." Mal grabbed Cara's stuff and stowed it away in one of the sleeping sections. They were only about 5 miles from Castleton, and Erin couldn't see that short distance being too much of a problem for a girl with a lovely shiny motorbike, but decided she had to let it go. "Can we go to the school now, please, Mal?" Erin looked across at her brother, who nodded slowly. "I think we need to take this carefully, Erin," Cara announced, sitting down firmly on one of the camp chairs. She crossed her long, slim, denim-clad legs and stared at Erin with piercing blue eyes. She wasn't ready to go anywhere. Erin could feel herself getting frustrated. She seemed to have no control over the matter. She couldn't get to the school by herself, being so dependent on the others. Erin still wasn't sure about this girl, this young woman who sat before her. She wanted answers now. "All right," Erin said stiffly, sitting down opposite Cara. "Perhaps it's time you tell me what you know." The words came out like sharp stones being thrown at a window, but they fell short, and Cara just smiled. "You don't trust me, do you, Erin?" Erin shuffled in her chair, took a deep breath, and looked directly at her opponent. "She looks like the Ice Queen," thought Erin, with her spiky white thorns for hair, so sharp with gel that even the crash helmet couldn't dent them. Eyes as cold as steel, and her sharp, angular features. She decided she would pretend to trust her. Her instincts were warning her to take care. "Erin?" Mal asked. He was still standing near the sleeping sections, but now came over to his sister. She felt very, very, very vulnerable at that moment. But as her brother stared at her, she steeled herself, raising her chin just like she did when she was about to spar with someone in karate. "Erin?" he said again. "Yes, Cara, I trust you, because Mal trusts you." Mal sighed at Erin's reply. "Good, I'm glad." We have enough enemies to contend with without us not being a team. Cara reached down to pick up a black folder. I'm sure you have some questions. What would you like to know? Erin and Mal began to bombard her with questions, some of which she answered, others she skirted round. How do you know? What is this place? How can we see our sister? Is it dangerous? Finally, the brother and sister stopped, exhausted by the exchange, and tried to absorb the information she had presented them. Cara had photographs of the farm and the land surrounding it, but little else in her folder. One thing she did have, she saved to the end. The piece of yellowing paper she passed to Mal was old and wrinkled. I don't understand, Mal said, passing the paper to Erin. This isn't a school. Erin studied the paper carefully, turning it over but finding nothing on the reverse. The faint lines that cut into the ageing thin skin of paper showed an octagonal pattern with smaller octagons radiating from a central square. Each of the shapes had a series of connecting lines, some labelled, others left blank. In the bottom left-hand corner, the words Zephyr Nuclear Bunker could just be made out. One word had been stamped across the whole map: decommissioned. She handed the paper back to Cara, who then held it up grinning. It is the school. The school is underground, within the secret nuclear bunker, completely hidden from view. No one can get in, and no one comes out, unless they have permission. The farm is the reception area. The bunker lies directly beneath the farm and the surrounding fields. Cara took the paper back. This is a plan from 1946, when it was first built after the Second World War. It was withdrawn from use in 1970. Mal was intrigued. Really? That's amazing. I've heard of underground bunkers from wartime. Dad and I found a website about one. He paused and thought for a moment. OK, so we know a bit more about the place, but... Erin cut in. What we want to know is, how do you know all this if it's such a secret? What's your connection? Cara's eyes narrowed. My father has done some research over the years. He found the plan in an old notebook given to him by a friend who passed away. But how do you know this is below the ground? Mal asked. A lot of this is guesswork. Unfortunately, we can't be sure. That's where you two come in. What do you mean? And why do you care anyway? The school has nothing to do with you, Erin interjected. Cara suddenly stood and walked over to her rucksack. She pulled it open, rifled through until she found a wallet. Opening it, she stared down. And then, in contrast to her icy manner, tears melted down her face as though she was thawing out. The Ice Queen did seem to have emotions, Erin thought. Cara stroked the inside of the wallet gently. Little Georgie, she whispered, almost to herself. They were all silent. Mal and Erin looked at each other. Mal shrugged his shoulders and Erin raised her eyebrows back at him. Mal stood and put his arm around the weeping girl, and she turned and fell into his arms, sobbing. As she did so, she dropped the wallet onto the ground below. Erin reached over and scooped it up. A young boy grinned back at her with dimples in his round pink cheeks. He held a wooden train in one hand and he was sitting on a fat tree trunk. The bright sunshine behind him lit up his blonde hair. He looked about 4 years old. Excuse me. Cara finally stopped crying and sat down again. She blew her nose and wiped tears of pain away. He's my little brother, she explained. Was my little brother. He died shortly after that was taken. Meningitis. One moment he was there, and the next he was gone. I'm so sorry, Cara. I had no idea. Erin felt guilty for not trusting her. She handed back the picture. Me too. That must have been awful for you and your parents. Mal knelt and took her tiny white hands into his large tanned ones. My mother couldn't cope. Dad was very patient with her. He was grieving too, but seemed to cope with it because of his work. Cara was silent, Her eyes looked away in the distance, a distant past that the others knew nothing about. Mal stroked her hand gently, and this seemed to make her return to the present. She died 6 months after Georgie, a car crash, head-on collision. She was on the wrong side of the road. Dad said Mum had been drinking that night and there was nothing anyone could do. Cara wiped her tears away and blew her nose. At least they're together now, Mum and George. Dad and I have each other. Erin stood and grabbed the kettle and stumbled out of the tent, her own tears coming thick and fast now. She needed to be alone with her own thoughts. There was a heavy ache in the very depths of her stomach, so much to take in. A picture of home and Mum and Dad came to her as she stood over the water tap in the tiny corrugated shed, filling the kettle and wishing she was at home in their kitchen watching Dad baking chocolate muffins, their favourite. Freezing water pouring down onto her shoes shocked her into the present, and she grabbed the stiff brass tap, trying desperately to turn off the waterfall. It wouldn't budge. The concrete floor was soon flooded. Erin grabbed the overflowing kettle and squelched back to the tent, shouting to Mal to come and help. Later that night, once everyone was tucked up in their sleeping bags, Erin scanned her text messages, but there was nothing from Petra. She was relieved, but felt sad too. Her friend would have been good at cheering her up with her silly jokes about the teachers at school. She was brilliant at doing impressions and took off Mr. Gunn, their maths teacher, particularly well, especially when he was having a stammering fit. It was unfortunate he had problems with the letter S when he had to teach statistics and sums and signs and symbols. Erin smiled at her memories, but that hollow feeling soon returned and she sighed. Anyway, she thought some people have a lot worse to put up with in life. Cara, for example, was living the pain every day of losing not only her brother but her mother too. Why did she show us the photo and tell us that story, Erin thought. Suddenly she sat bolt upright. What's all this got to do with the school? Cara never explained the link. She never answers questions. She seems to skirt round things until you've forgotten what you asked in the first place. Erin's mind was full of thoughts and images that seemed to merge and change like a child's kaleidoscope. The more she tried to work things out, the more confused she became. Right, she said to herself, let's think logically about what I do know. She began to make bullet points onto her phone. I have a twin sister, Miranda. She looks like me. Mum and Dad see her every 5 years. Mum has pictures of Miranda taken in exotic places. This one she'd worked out after concluding she wasn't going mad and forgotten visiting these places. We watched black cars leave the hotel and disappear at the farm, but we never actually saw Miranda in one of the cars. We know there is a school in an old, disused underground bunker. Or do we? Erin wasn't sure whether to believe Cara on this. Erin began a new list. Questions. Is Miranda in the hotel, country house we visited? Is M in the farmhouse? Is M in an underground school? What is the connection between Cara and Miranda and little George? What is our next step? Go and watch the farm and visit the hotel place again. Erin snuggled down into her sleeping bag. She was beginning to feel sleepy. Tomorrow I will have all the answers. I will find my sister and we will be friends. With those thoughts, Erin closed her eyes and slept.